we all want that, like, that out of, like, we are victims of a horrible circumstance, and that's why we are so fucked up mentally and so sad, and life is so hard. And he gave that to them.
One of the things that these kids could not do was to re-examine the premises they consciously or unconsciously agreed to.
And it's like this sort of eight thing of, I'm going to find where the bodies are buried psychologically for you. Like, if you give me some kind of potent memory, I'm going to use it.
The big hormone enneagram.
I'm John Lekovich, 415, sexual self-pres, 458 Trifix.
I'm David Gray, self-pres sexual, 9 with 1 wing, 974 Trifix.
What up, it's Emeka. I'm an 8-wing-7, sexual self-pres with 854 fixes.
Hi, I'm Nancy. I'm a 3-wing-4 self-pres social, a 369 Trifix.
Hi, I'm Alexandra. I'm a social self-preservation 9-wing-1, 963 Trifix.
If you like or hate us, make sure you go like and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and make sure you leave us a review.
All right. Did everybody watch the thing?
Yeah.
Yep.
I watched the first 2.5 episodes. I didn't make it through all the way.
I feel like that's plenty. Like, the last half of the...
It was getting hard to watch, honestly.
Yeah, like, when he was, like, beating them up. Beating that dude up with the hammer
thing.
The
thing where he grabbed his tongue. I was like, ugh.
And I mean, for me, the most insane episode was the third one of just like that doctor girl, the way she was like, "I love Larry," like, you know, just like
yeah,
just
actual brainwashing.
Somebody
he completely lost it. It was crazy.
Somebody who's completely has no sense of reality anymore. I don't know if I've ever watched somebody in the midst of that like that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I've ever seen it. Like, you know, you hear about stuff like that, or you can infer that some behavior was something like that. But her just actually like having like nothing in her eyes and being like, "I love Larry," and then like slowly starting to come back. To me, why I thought this documentary was so wild and fascinating was, I guess the two things is, one, how somebody so unremarkable as Larry got into people's minds, and then how much people's minds can be influenced by something external and something, you know, memories replaced, all these kind of things, and then like how it can get so kind of broken and then remended. It was it was just it was like looking at the mind as like some other kind of organ, like getting liver damage and then like learning to like have your liver slowly repair itself or something.
It was just adaptation all the way through. You know? I mean, to me, it was a lesson in Bermuda 6 and 9, basically.
But at the same time, watching it, I've seen a bunch of these docs where somebody comes along who convinces their 9 or 6 based on some kind of authority play that they have some involvement with the government. This guy in particular, there was so much recording that you got to see how persuasive he was. So on one hand, yes, a 9 or a 6 can fall for it because it's a pattern, it's a formula that these people fall for. It's like somebody comes in and they sweep you off your feet and they give you this authority play, and people who just sort of like, without questioning, respect the government, respect military experience, and then you get them in with some kind of emergency, like, if you don't help us, your family's going to be in danger. I get how that can be compelling for a 9 or a 6, but this guy in particular, I think what stood out to me is that he is very psychologically persuasive. I wouldn't be surprised if that would work on most people for a little bit. I mean, it's just shocking that it worked for that long, but like, I mean, just listening to the recordings, that is a really hard person to deal with. Like, this is sort of the 8-9, like, he's so calmly just unrelenting that he just wouldn't let them. They didn't have a choice. If you had to leave, if you stayed, you had to comply with what he wanted you to say.
The girl that didn't like from the get like kind of had his number. Do we have an idea on what she is?
6.
I was
Really?
thinking she was a 6 with a 1 fix. Is
Yeah.
what I got. And I was thinking the guy, the cult, Larry, the wonderful Larry. I was thinking he might be 8'6", like
Yep,
that
that's
triple
exactly what I was
right.
thinking.
thing. Yeah.
I wouldn't hurt a fly.
So yeah, so
Trifix. Oh
what
my
we should
God.
do for everybody is we're talking about what's the documentary called? Stolen Youth.
Stolen Youth.
Yeah.
So we watched a documentary called Stolen Youth about this fucking dad who moves into his daughter's, it's not a dorm, it's like a house where a bunch, like 8 students live, and crashes on their couch after he gets out of prison. And he starts helping them out in dumb ways, just like making dinner for them, and then individually sort of bring fucking cat on my lap. He just fell off me and scratched me all the way down.
He comes in in a really compelling way. He makes himself useful from a rejection point of view. I could definitely see what he's doing, cooking for the kids. He's
Steak
buying
dinners.
groceries, and he's also giving them advice. And these are college students, and this is a much older man who's knows how to present like you've got your life ahead of you, and if you want to become your best self, like you've got to really tap into some like self-actualization stuff. And so like he's got these, I feel like he's probably a social 8 where he set up a dynamic where he's the mentor. Felt like this was effective also because a lot of these kids seemed like they were looking for something. They were looking for some kind of like father figure, sense of guidance. And so he just stepped in, made himself useful, and was very compelling. And it just escalated from there.
It also, some of the things were interesting though is that first I think he was the father of one of the girls in there.
There you
So
go.
That was
like,
his in.
Yeah.
That was his in, and they didn't really address what happened to her. She just kind of fell off, which is fucking weird. And this went over like a 10-year period.
Yeah.
But the other thing was, I've been thinking about this because the school was Sarah Lawrence, which is like in Yonkers, New York. It's kind of similar to the school I went to, where it's like kind of unstructured, but it's a little bit more froofy,
Artsy.
And I wondered if maybe one of the influences was that it seemed like Sarah Lawrence didn't have much of an edge, right? Like it just seemed like
There you go.
And so I wonder if there was like the people there were like letting their guards down about the kind of people that would be in their atmosphere.
Right.
Because I mean, like, I don't know if you are in an environment where, like a school environment where people are just like kind of dicks, your radar is open, I mean, he just got in there, and the first thing he started with was like this shut-in girl. Do you think she was like a 9'8"?
Isabel? Yeah, 9'8".
I think so.
She might even have like
sure.
5'6". Like she seemed really, really removed.
Yeah.
Really removed. And he like talked to her and then like stayed the night in a room, and it's kind of ambiguous what happened, and later became like one of his girlfriends, and his main
Henchman is
enforcer.
right. Yeah.
But
Not too
and was
bad.
also his daughter Talia's best friend.
Mhm.
And then so like he basically starts sleeping with her, and then that fucking like, I know there's a whole like, oh, the victims, da 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 da, but like I was so annoyed by that Santos guy.
Me
Oh,
too.
yeah.
God,
So
me too.
punchable.
Because
God, I wanna punch
he let
him.
both of his sisters in there,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he was like,
But not even let them, like,
He
told them, hey,
recommended
come
it.
here.
Yeah.
This guy's really cool.
yeah. So then anyway, like starts with Isabel, and then he gets to Santos, who just is like, I need advice, and then
Mhm.
he's like, wow, Larry really helped me, and it was I was really trying to like listen for what specifically the goodie that Larry was offering them early on, and it was kind of like he seemed some kind of psychologically knowledgeable, but not anything special. And I mean,
Well, I would say that he was cold reading them pretty well. Like he was able to point out, like, it wouldn't take a genius to be able to point out like, oh, you have this hang up about this insecurity and it's holding you back. But I could just see sort of the 8 thing of this kid lacks confidence. He probably has sexual insecurities. let me hit him with that, and it's gonna just like make this guy feel like, oh my, wow, he knows so much about me. Like he was doing that so well with everybody.
It's also just the thing of that 8's model just sort of incidentally a kind of unified will, and just with their presence, you know what I mean? So it's experiential, you know what I mean? That you're around somebody that isn't so splayed out in all directions in terms of just where your mind is at, like the way that 9 and 6 are.
Yeah, as a young 9 and 6, you're probably searching for that stability, and he offered it to them.
Yeah, there's a certain stability that he offers because 8, especially 8 wing 9, has this like total boulder, really heavy, unmoving. Like at least the 7 wing has some kind of dynamicism to it. Whatever that word is.
Dynamism.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. So there's already that, just like a body influence. Like, how do I become that solid? But also, I think with I think 2 fix is spot on, and I think the offering some sort of help from an 8 fix from 8 and 2 speaks to a certain 3-ish quality that all the students must have had too, because they were able to receive some sort of like psychological athletic coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like he was really his first offering was just like his like campaign or whatever thing was like improvement, self-improvement.
Right.
Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Which I feel like would appeal to 3 more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. He was very skillful with leveraging relationships and knowing how to impress people. And especially, that whole family with the Santos and his sisters and Isabel, who are like pretty poor, come from really poor families. And and they were the most hooked in. And so this is this guy who seemingly has all this free money and he's buying groceries, and she's saying something like, I've never seen or gone grocery shopping with anyone before who's...
right.
And so he's going out and taking them out to dinner, and there's this sort of like, he's the, the king of the court, and each of them wants to get as close to him as possible. So he created this sort of cult dynamic where like he's at the center, he's giving all this advice, but he's also has all the resources and also has all the knowledge. And yeah, it felt like Social 8 with the 2 fix was just very potent mix of extremely interpersonally cued in.
Yep.
And also, these victims, there's kind of like a power status imbalance where like, what a potent mix. Like it would be really hard to not be swayed by somebody like that.
One of the things, I don't remember what we were talking about before we started recording, but Emeka, you were mentioning the government military thing.
Yeah, let me mention that again. When I was trapped in Texas, I did a huge binge on
Against your will by a cult.
By a cult of one.
Yeah.
Bejeweled. I went on a kick of these sort of like brainwashing cults, and Tinder Swindler was one of them. We've already did an episode about it, but it seemed like to follow a certain pattern where someone would come along and either they would show some kind of status either through wealth or connection with the government or the military, and it seemed like you needed that combination to get the immediate respect from just a stranger. People immediately turn their brains off when they think that you're doing something in relation to the military or the government, or the Secret Service or something like that.
That shit blows my fucking mind.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing it's just, what an absolute, like, military is just equals douche.
Yeah. And they get the strangers, essentially, to take massive action quickly based on an emergency, that if they don't take action, that their friends and their families' lives are in danger. And so it continues this, I've saw multiple, like 3 or 4 documentaries where the same thing would happen, where you're talking about almost a decade plus, where this person has basically been brainwashed and taken over with the same kind of plot of, I'm a high-ranking government official and you need to follow what I'm telling you or your family's going to die. And then they start like draining their family members of hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of like 5 to 10 years, and nobody sees them until one day they finally decide, all right, I'm done. It's like the same thing.
Yeah.
Over and over again.
Yeah. And this guy also like didn't really work for the military. Like
No.
he made up a bunch of shit about it. Like I know he did some loosely government something like but with like state government in like New York City or New Jersey or something, but he just pretended to be like some CIA operator type of, I think they mentioned he was like disposing General Noriega or something like that, or Gorbachev, you know, something, whatever. And
It seemed
these
like
kids
he
were
had
like, whoa, not even
seemed
knowing
like-
what that meant.
He was like in the same room with them and they had photos. Like
Mhm.
it's like he did something for work where he was, you know, involved in some kind of money
Happened to
laundering or
have
something.
photos.
But he was just friends with some law enforcement people and had photos with important people, and that's enough to convince people that you've worked with them.
Yeah, that was one of the things too that I think the Santos guy mentioned was that like early, like as soon as he's like, I'm on the couch crashing, he just comes out with all these stories and these photos and these like fake documents about how important he is, and these kids were just like, this is amazing and real, you know.
And he had this letter and he had like no person. The thing that got me was he had no personal effects, but he happened to have a fucking letter
Yeah, and he's
that,
also
like, proved exactly what he was saying. And it's like, I'm sorry, but anybody who works in the government doesn't go waving around letters. Like, look,
he's also a
Where I
fat dad
work.
on a couch. You know what I mean?
Right.
yeah, exactly. Like, shut the fuck up. If you work for them, then like, I don't know, go there.
You know, what I was thinking was that in this specific scenario, I could see how like you could build a foundation of trust. All right, so this friend that you live with who's been talking up her dad for months, and the dad finally shows up, and this is someone that you feel really close to, you're a freshman in college, and you're in this sort of like wide open, impressionable environment. And then this person shows up and he comes in, you know, social aid. He comes in like guns blazing with all these status signifiers and he's making himself useful. My first impression of just hearing the recording of his voice, he sounds really calm. He sounds nice.
He does. Yeah.
Even when he was doing all this terrible stuff, he doesn't sound that mean, like as
No.
he's being forceful.
He's not loud
So,
or like overbearing.
I just imagine that this is very plausible. Like, it's not implausible for someone to fall for this. I mean, it's crazy to fall for it for 10 years as far as he went, but like that scenario.
Yeah. So for people listening, why we're like this lasted over 10 years, and it started in this fucking like on campus housing, and then they moved into this guy's apartment, which was not even
There it is.
Larry's apartment in
Right.
Manhattan. We should go into how this all started, but it went over like 10 years. He sorted all this money from different people, but he had like, you know, had these kids like, you know, he was having sex with some of them, they were having sex with each other. They were all like living in this same tiny fucking apartment, which it's like in a high rise in New York, which I can only imagine in summer with those windows.
Yeah.
Just the mugginess plus the power tools plus that guy he looks like he smells like bad ham, you know, just like radiating, and just everything's just gunky and
Just his bald head alone. was-
yeah, just like a ham under those like 7-Eleven heater lamps, and then
a taquito.
but then he's like getting like the Santos and his two sisters to get all this money from their parents. He's like brainwashing
While convincing them that the parents like poison them.
poison them, and drug dealers. He's convinced all these people that they've been poisoned. He's told all these kids that they have been poisoning him and the other kids, to the point where even one of these girls ends up becoming a call girl and
To pay back.
the damage from the fake poison that never happened,
Yeah.
amassing over $2 million
Yeah.
in sex work for this creepy fuck. And then it just like goes on for like 10 fucking years.
Yeah.
And then you know, eventually the girl who was forced into this sex work, some like website shows up where she's like clearly like mentally out of it, deranged, and talking about how she poisoned everybody in that house way back 10 years ago. And
he's recording her confession, quote unquote
yes.
confession.
And then somebody who went to school with her was like, what the fuck? And he's like a journalist now, and he and a couple others that used to live together like make it a story, and it blows up, and then he gets arrested, blah, blah, blah. But like,
Partly because they're worried that they got poisoned, right? Was that part of it?
no, they were like, that doesn't make any sense, but
Oh,
something really fucked up is happening. And,
Right.
you know, part of like why we're talking about this, because I can't remember what we recorded, or what we talked about before we recorded or not, was just like the extent of the brainwashing over this compelling but just generally unremarkable asshole who's like, you know, just, I don't know. Anyway, I just wanted to set that up because like the emotional impact of like, how is this happening doesn't really land unless you know a little bit about the overview.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember the core mechanism that he would use to manipulate or pressure them or extort them for money was that he had originally went to prison because he had been part of some kind of money laundering ring. And so he had lost his family, lost custody of his kids, been divorced. He lost everything. And so in prison, he had launched a campaign to blame certain individuals who he had been friends with for what had happened. And so he carried that story after he'd like love bombed these kids. He eventually started telling them about like these, you know, I think it was Carrick is what he called them.
Carrick, yeah.
Who believed he had set him up. And so he started, you know, pressuring these kids to confess to what did he say? Like, why are you sabotaging me? Like, so it started with bringing him all these tools to the apartment, and then started, you know, why are you damaging my property? And
yeah. Why are you trying to hurt me?
And then
why are you hurting me?
And so he would just keep this up until they would confess to doing so, and then he would keep pressuring them. Did Carrick put you up to this? The person he's been blaming, and so they would just start racking up all these charges, and it's like, you owe me like, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that's how like these kids then have to go to their parents to get this money. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah. So they. Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to read this. I just did a quick Google. There's a Vanity Fair article that talks about this. It's called the Sarah Lawrence sex cult, for anybody that wants to just look up the story without watching the documentary. Anyway, this I think covers his like 8-ness before we even get to Sarah Lawrence. Before he even gets to Sarah Lawrence, it says, in 2005, 5 years before he moved into his daughter's dorm at Sarah Lawrence College and took a cult-like hold over her young friends, Larry Ray, the guy we're talking about, received a psychological evaluation that was conducted as part of a custody trial with his ex-wife, and the judgment was alarming. This is a quote from the judgment. "It is literally impossible to evaluate Mr. Ray in the usual clinical manner. His personality dynamics are so configured that he is able to manipulate and control almost any situation in which he finds himself, including a psychological interview with a forensic examiner, no matter how experienced that examiner may be. Mr. Ray is very good at what he does."
Wow.
This is before he came to a Sarah Lawrence dorm full of like 19, 20-year-olds.
Little soft boys.
One of the things too that happened was, so he's love bombing them. He's like supporting them. He's like they're all of their dads, and he's like helping them out. And he's just such a great guy. And then summer comes, and somehow they only showed the guy the Asian guy, like they only showed him very briefly in the clip, who owned the apartment. It like wasn't even Larry Ray's apartment, but he pretended it was. But he just like fucking
gave it over.
Yeah, he took it over. He told this guy, I can't remember his name, but he was this like older Asian guy that he was like, I'm just worried about my daughter and something I need this apartment for my daughter. And the guy's like, probably also 9, was like,
Right,
here you go. He just takes it over and then moves in like, it's like 1-bedroom apartment. He moves in like 7 kids or something. And then they start amassing, like to your point, Emeka, about how he like escalates it. He's like amassing stuff and like pots and pans. And then he'll be like, did you damage my pan? And they're like, no. And he's like, why did you damage my pan? And don't you take responsibility for things? And they'd be like, I do take responsibility, Larry, but I don't remember doing this. And he'd be like, why aren't you taking responsibility? It was just like escalate. And they'd be like, okay, I must have done it because I don't remember doing it, but I must have. And open the gate to accepting alternative views of reality and just surrendering their agency.
Yeah.
And I think the important part was he built up this system before he moved them into this apartment. He built up this system of, to better yourself, you must take responsibility for every
Yes.
action. And we are a family, and we're going to talk about everything that happens, and we're going to apologize, and we're going to talk about taking responsibility. So by the time he got to this like escalation point, taking responsibility was like this expectation of like, you are bettering yourself.
Yeah.
And if you don't take a responsibility, then
Right.
you're not bettering yourself. How dare you? So even if he came to them with false accusations, there was this built-up expectation.
Yeah, that's one thing that I found unique about this situation was that because maybe we had all the recordings, it felt like I could see how he did it. It was he built a narrative, a foundation of trust, a foundation of closeness, and sort of like almost like a philosophy, that this is the philosophy that's going to help you actualize. And then based on that philosophy, then he started to create these sort of false narratives. And he didn't like, escalate to like the, oh, you're with Carrick immediately. It was built up from, you're damaging my property. And then once they gave in to, oh, I don't remember if I did, but I guess I'm a bad person for not remembering when I did. It's like, well, I did. Well, then the next step is, well, who put you up to it? Carrick put you up to it. And then, but the thing is, it's like, it's sort of like breaking somebody down. It's like, if I'm going to keep you up till 7 a.m. until you give me the answer I want. And people might watch this thing and be like, oh, that would never happen to me. Like, if you say yes to the initial love bomb, you're done for.
Yeah, that's a good, like, one of the things that these kids could not do was to re-examine the premises they'd consciously or unconsciously agreed to. That's like Nancy's point's really good. It's like there's this philosophy that Larry Ray presents about accountability and responsibility and self-improvement, and they build on that for like it seems like over a year. Like it was the whole school year and then the summer, and it was like they were like, we were improving, we were getting, like, he was using his military training to get us up, and we were working out and improve our confidence. But it's like,
some of them, didn't they advance also, like in their careers and in school and stuff like that?
Yeah,
so there were like results that came from this too,
Right.
which only strengthened the resolve to keep going.
but they never like re-examined the whatever the baton they gave, the green light they gave to Larry Ray, and so it was like they couldn't hold perhaps that there were both improvements in their lives, but also this guy was fucking with them, and he was like, making them question their reality and stuff like this. And like there was the guy, he seemed like kind of gay.
Is it the white guy?
He was a white guy, and he was like questioning his sexuality. He was a very soft-spoken guy.
Yeah.
And then Larry's like, no, you're straight. And then he's like, oh, okay, good. And then,
Oh, cool.
Oh, good.
Oh, thank God, I don't have to think about this anymore.
and then so he's like, in this tiny apartment, he's like sleeping in the same, he's got Isabel from the dorms like sleeping in his room, and has Isabel like come out and like be sexual with him or something, and then involves him in a 3-way with her, just like encroach. It was just like so fucking weird. And so it was just like this, like, oh, okay, like I'm agreeing to some level of like Larry's feedback or guidance on my sexuality, and then there's just this surrendering of agency around his sexual. I mean, on every front, I guess, but like after that, was just really interesting to like try to understand.
I interpreted that he seemed like he was still like a kid, like a teenager, even though he's still like 19 or 18 or something. It felt like he just needed someone to give him some level of confidence about his sexuality, because Larry asked him, do you think about having sex with men? And he said no. I was like, then you're not gay. And he was like, oh my God, I just needed someone to give me some sense of clarity. Yeah. And he was, and I think Larry could sense that he had a lot of shyness around his sexuality, and sort of like encouraged him to like do stuff with Isabel. And I can see it from the 8 perspective. If I give you a transformative experience that takes you to another level in your mind, you're not going anywhere. That's the possession.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So he saw that that's what he needed. He needed to feel more confident about his sexuality. And it's, if I'm going to give you your first sexual experience, you're mine.
Wow. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It's interesting to me, the 8 motif of, where he ultimately went to, which is being the victim, because that's sort of not what you would expect of 8. I don't know what you guys would say about that, as far as like sort of taking that hit of that I'm being whatever used or whatever. That's an
Why are
interesting...
you hurting me?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is
Like,
interesting.
He did the victim thing a lot, and I mean, I know that like he's got a 6 fix, can do victim in the line of 2 and the 2 fix stuff, but
that's true.
That's the thing about 8s is that there can be this like compelling I'm a victim narrative that doesn't seem like it fits in with the 8 thing, but like I mean, I remember when I was around the age of the Larry's victims, I lived with my aunt who's like crazy and an 8. And we had this arrangement where she lived in Seattle, and we would pay like a certain amount a month, and as like rent. And then she like just decided it needed to go up, and it was like really bizarre. And she was putting all this pressure on me and my mom, but especially me, and like trying to leverage me against my mom against me, and stuff like this about like. And I was like, I don't know what the fuck's happening. And I was like, all right, I gotta go. And so we just left, like because it was just clearly like. 8 Wing 9 like there was just like a lot of pressure in there, and it was like, all right, you're just trying to fuck with me. But it was like this thing where she was like, she's my mom's older sister, and was like, I can't remember exactly what she would say, but it was this whole thing about how my mom has always mistreated her and never thought about her and all the ways that she was like taking care of my mom growing up, which is like not true at all. And
it sounds like 8. It sounds like the 2-6 stem comes into as like fodder. How do I say this? Like the 8 uses the 6-2 victimization superego thing as reason to continue leveraging, as reason to continue like, okay, because you did this to me, that is the justification I have to impose my will on you.
Yes.
Or just looking at it from 8 alone, it's kind of like the 2 thing of look at all I did for you.
Totally.
Right. Right.
I mean, the first like one of the first fucking lines in The Godfather is like, "You come to me on this day of my daughter's wedding and ask for a favor without saying thank you," or whatever the fuck it was. It was like this putting like, "Oh, you've disrespected me," and it's putting that kind of thing where the person is like, "Oh, I have to earn something back."
Right.
That's like a certain kind of pressure that that's like Larry Ray like perfected.
Yeah, I felt like social 8 is already potent enough as it is. I get triggered by social 8s because it's like, think about just imagining like the 8 leverage machine, but just focused on people. It's like, holy shit.
Yeah.
But 6-2 felt like, what could be more intense interpersonally than this combination?
Right.
8 Wing 9 with 6 and 2 stem social. I'm assuming social self-pres. That was a lot.
He got self-pres social because of his like interest in tools, and he was like, talk about carving out a holding environment.
Yeah, I was thinking
that
possible.
Yeah,
brings them to fucking South Carolina or something, and he's just like a maniac doing power tool stuff with like a bobcat or whatever those things are. Just like what the fuck are you doing? But it was just like,
yeah, I was stuck between those 2 options. And I was, my dad's social self-pres at 8 Wing 9, and there's kind of like an 8-9, I think, regardless of the stacking of they're just really stuck in the sort of the body. And my dad was like my dad was even as a social type, he was home tools. Like there was a lot of weekends where he would just put me to task to just being the tools person while he'd do like, it's a weird, I think the self-pres second with 8s, it's underestimated how self-presi 8s might seem, even with,
I see that.
For the listeners out there, Larry had all the kids at one point literally tear up the grass in this South Carolina home because it wasn't laid down right, and then put grass back down, which they didn't say sod, they said grass. And then it was still not laid down right, so they tore the grass back up. And like the amount of film that Larry has of them just digging dirt for no reason, just digging dirt. in the
He
middle
kept
of the
them
night. It's
busy as fuck.
chaotic.
Yeah.
It's chaotic.
That's another leveraging. Yeah, I guess just like leveraging implementation tool or whatever. The fact that he was just always pressing down on them at all times.
All the time.
So we can say that it's like attachment, whatever. But it's also like he never let up
Right.
one single time. So attachment or not, you do need space to think for yourself and to
Yes.
feel
Yeah.
for yourself in something. And when any force is just like coming down on you, not giving you any space to do that, what other choice do you have?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it was kind of interesting to how simple it ultimately was for each person to leave.
Right.
Like nobody
Yeah.
had to run away. Nobody had to like scheme or anything. One guy just got like 10 minutes alone on a roof and then he left and never came
Right.
back. Like it was that easy for just that. It was that amount of space, that amount of like breathing room for yourself. Think about it for yourself. Oh, this is insane. I'm leaving.
Yep. That's why
Point.
That's why I was thinking it was social, because I would imagine the self-pres 8 would have physical restraints to keep people from leaving. It was a complete sort of social interpersonal hold. They could have any one of them could have left at any point, and that's when they had enough space to sort of think for themselves.
Yeah.
He didn't really control them. I mean, he controlled their activities, but it didn't seem like
He had
tried.
a chain on the refrigerator, though.
Sure, yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, I mean, another option for self-pres social is that partly what could look social as if his 2-fix was
Right.
second.
That's
maybe.
true.
Mm.
That's
Yeah.
what I think it is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I think it is. I think
And
2-6 is already going to be
and it-
really relational.
That's
And
true.
it's 2
yeah.
with a 3 wing, so there's this sort of salesman
Ooh.
of salesman.
I think he's self-pres social.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think he just has a 6-2, like, what's
People-y.
going on? Da, da, da. Yeah,
Yeah.
people-y,
It's super.
people-y.
That stem is so people involved, and it's like really involved. You
It's
know?
super
I think we've
involved.
identified the most dangerous type on the Enneagram.
I agree. Most disgusting type.
Yeah.
No, it was bizarre. Like how much stuff he was making them do, all the physical labor he was. But like to your point, Alexander, like I felt more sorry for these people than I have in the other ones that I've watched, because a lot of the other ones is like, oh, how stupid do you have to be? Like that's New York City chef lady, the blonde, who had
Mhm.
given her boyfriend like
Oh yeah,
like
yeah.
like $1 million or something
Oh,
like that.
right.
I was so pissed off about that one because you're not like, but these are poor kids. These are poor, Dominican college students who basically got like completely taken over. I mean, and it's not that it was an easy con. He was relentless.
He was relentless. And
He
there was
worked
so much
really
to-
hard on this.
There was so much to leverage over too, and this is like where I really think 3 comes in, is because these were poor Dominican kids that grew up in the Bronx,
Mm-hmm.
and one girl had made it from like all living in a 1-bedroom apartment to being a Harvard accepted medical student.
That was
Oh,
sad.
like-
Sister,
one
yeah.
crushed me, dude.
Yeah, so like there is something I think we probably think she was a 6, right? She's the one that like
Yeah.
fucking lost it.
Yeah.
But 3-fix has to be inevitable because
Right.
first of all, I mean, I guess I'm just repeating myself, but I think it was the openness to influence to advance.
Yes.
Yeah, so the whole thing, let's see. The whole thing of her, like I forgot her name. But
Felicia.
Felicia.
Yeah.
Felicia, something like that. Yeah, so she was like she didn't even fucking live in New York. She like lived in LA and she like visited her brother and immediately fell in love with Larry, and she was like 2 weeks or something away from like becoming a full fucking doctor.
God, that hurt.
He like
That
Oh
hurts
my
so
God.
bad.
yeah.
That
And
was so
yeah,
rough.
She'd grown up in the Bronx with like a poor Dominican family, and
They all lived in a basement. Like
Right.
6. How many of them?
there's
I think it was like
yeah,
6 of them. or
7 of
something.
them, yeah.
and like they interviewed the parents at certain times, and they're just like
Oh, the
super
parents
sweet
killed
Dominican,
me.
like
Yeah.
oh, Dios, like they've got this like little altar for their kids and stuff like this. And just
They both look like 9s, and they gave him like
They're totally nice.
300K.
Yeah.
I was like, where did you get 300K from?
Yeah. Like,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
sold our house, money will come and go, it's
Oh
fine.
my God.
Yep.
I am. What's weirdly enough, I'm a little pissed about the parents though. The
Yeah.
kids, I have much more.
Yeah.
Obviously, obviously like space to be like, okay, you guys are definitely victims. A little bit on the parents. I'm like, who the?
You didn't physically walk your ass up there? Yeah. Like the mom that didn't come, she was like, oh, I guess I won't go. Like the gray-haired mom.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah,
right.
yeah,
She pissed me off because
Yeah.
she was like, oh, well. And it's like, bitch, you didn't fly your ass out there? Like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
There's stupid young kids. You don't know that they're still stupid.
My mom would have been on the
Go check on
doorstep
them.
in 1 minute. She would have been like, what the fuck is wrong with you, Nancy?
No, that
Yeah.
mom was like an actual like negligent parent.
Yes,
Yeah.
I
on
agree.
drugs and
Totally, I
alcohol.
agree.
Was that Isabel's mom?
Isabel's
Isabella,
mom.
yeah.
Yeah.
Another 9-wing 8.
Yes,
She was
that's what I got
completely
too.
out of it.
Yeah, like I think they strongly suggested she was an alcoholic or something.
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
One thing back to the threeness of Felicia, I think she was so primed to have like that breakdown, and it just happened to be under Larry's like guise. Because as a 3, right, she's doing the thing, right? She got into Harvard, she's got into medical school, she's going. And I feel like 3s that do that are just primed and ready to have the breakdown of what the fuck am I doing with my life? What the fuck is the point?
That's a good
And
point.
it just happened to like trigger that just meltdown of 3ness.
That's
and
a really good point.
He
yeah.
just took advantage of that.
She got the sense that she was just like fast tracking into this is what I need to do because I am poor and because I come from this background too, and I need to really excel. And he probably just gave her some kind of different direction, and that just like was catnip, and then sort of from the other coast implanting all these ideas that like she was under threat of assassination. And then when she fucking showed up to New York and they have that video of her and she's like in total mental breakdown
awful.
and she's like talking in that way that was like very high pitched, like a regressed like 6-year-old, and it was like it was like they're after me, and it was like it was so fucking weird.
Yeah,
like,
it was really scary.
It was so crazy.
Watching her after he left with her like you said, empty eyes. She was like, and her laugh fucking killed me because it always sounded like it was gonna turn into sobs at any moment. Like she was like, it's like
at the very end of the doc, there's
killing.
like 3 parts, and the third part is like everybody has basically like left. They've all like had a moment of clarity where they just walked away and basically with nothing, like just got exhausted and just wandered off in a dissociated state, and then we're like, I have to go, and they just got on a train and left or whatever it was. So there's just Isabel, the girl from the very beginning, and Felicia Santos' sister, the former doctor, and they're living in this house in New Jersey, and the documentary crew is like following them around, and like Isabel seems just like kind of shut down but still pretty sharp in a weird way.
Right.
Whereas Felicia is like, I love Larry. Larry's like my hubby, or what honey bunny man. I love, it was like this had this quality that was like she was not in touch with reality.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was just, I mean, that's why I was like, we need to talk about this thing, because it was like watching her, and then that story where she's like she's like recognizing that Larry fucked with her mind, and now that he's in jail, and they're like looking at old photos, and there's this picture of her like in a little like first communion dress or something, and she's like, oh yeah, I remember this memory. This is where I was like wearing this dress, and I like turn around and I look at my father and I say, look at my dress, and he doesn't look at me, and that's what started my
he wasn't there.
Yeah,
he
wasn't
there. Is what
or
she
yeah, something like that, and it's like this started my whole relationship with men that Larry helped me with, and then she like spaces like a computer, like a slowing down,
Yeah.
and then she goes, oh no, wait, that's Larry,
right,
and then says the real memory is that something, and it wasn't a big deal, but she must have shared some fucking weird memory or photograph, like look at me as a little kid or something, and he goes, oh, that's must have what somehow
it's incredible.
Planted new reality memory in her brain.
Yeah. And she still thought at like when I stopped halfway through the 3rd episode, and she still thought that she had met those men, the Kinnick or whatever.
Oh, right.
She still believed that. She was like, that could have happened when I was little. And it's like, how do you not see that?
There was a part where that Asian guy who basically let him use that apartment said that Larry had admitted admitted to him that he was building an army. That there was only
Right.
so much that we can do ourselves. That he's building an army, and so what I took away from that is that he had a plan to take control of these kids, and it was unrelenting. Like if you gave him anything he could use as sort of psychological leverage, he would use it, and he created a relentless attachment landscape for them.
Yeah.
Where it's like, if I keep you up to 7 a.m. repeatedly until you tell me that this memory is true, if you repeat it enough times, it becomes true. And it's like this sort of 8 thing of, I'm going to find where the bodies are buried psychologically for you. Like if you give me some kind of potent memory, I'm going to use it. And then he's like, if I just keep pummeling you with this new reality, it's like, I just think that you put somebody like that, most people are going to succumb to that. I'm not saying that they're going to be there for a decade, but that is a really, really psychologically dangerous person. Like that is extremely effective.
It's like a presidential candidate repeating that the election was rigged.
Right.
Right. Yeah, where attachment does come in for them, where I can see it really solidly is, yes, like he comes in, he creates these positive relationships. They're attaching of their own free will, right? Because they think that he's like great and has something to offer and has something like cares about their well-being. I think when he starts to turn and start to apply pressure, their attachment systems are used against them, because now it's become it's not attaching of their own free will. Now it's attaching out of survival.
Yes.
Now they have to give him those stories, or the bad thing will happen. You know, he will come down there. Now it's when, like, you know, how all of the type are just our survival strategies. Now they're giving him what he wants because he's fucking dangerous, and they know that. And so they're having to repeat this to themselves over and over and over again. This is the landscape I have to exist in, or I won't exist.
Yeah.
It's a good point, because something we didn't cover after we started recording is when he started turning it on to, why are you hurting me? Why are you hurting my tools? He starts physically abusing them, like hitting them.
Really aggressively.
The guy with the questioning of sexuality, like he had him wrap stuff around his junk. You know, he would like took a wire on his tongue, hitting him in the stomach with a hammer, and then had Santos and the doctor sister. She was like crying and wailing. And he was like, "I'm gonna hit myself until you stop." And so he just keeps punching himself in the face. It's just, and he's filming the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it becomes a survival strategy for the attachment at some point of like, I have to play along here, because now at this point, my livelihood depends on it. I don't even have the space to know whether or not I agree with it or not. But even if I was, as long as this person is around applying this threatening pressure, I have to comply or I won't make it out.
He's like sleep depriving them. He's denying them food. And he's got their schedule completely mapped out. Of course, it's almost forgetting that at any point you could leave, but they became slaves. Like their entire life was, under his control.
Yeah.
Well, he cut them off from their, support system, so they had nowhere to go. But one aspect of attachment that I saw kind of playing out, and I'm not 100% sure this is attachment, so maybe you guys can help me with this, but is we all want that, like, that out of, like, we are victims of a horrible circumstance, and that's why we are so fucked up mentally and so sad, and life is so hard, right? He gave them explanations for like why their lives felt so hard, because like your dad ignored you for this one time and you just psychologically crumbled, and you're like, oh, that's why I'm so depressed. And it's like everybody wants, or at least I don't know, I feel like at least attachment wants that explanation of why is life so hard right now? Totally. He gave that to them.
And I think partly that's some of his two-ness, which is getting to the really intimate, vulnerable, horrible thing that once you have that control of that secret in somebody's life, you're just right at their life pulse. It was just really two.
But I think you're right, Nancy. Like, I don't think it's just attachment. I think it's kind of everybody. But it's like we all recognize something is off. But somebody who's like fucked up, like Larry, tells you what it is and then pummels you with it and gives you a story around it, versus somebody who's like helping you arrive at your own knowing about what's going on for yourself, and asking you the right questions about it and open to it. And he could do like the therapist thing up until a point when he leveraged it for himself.
Well, I think with the therapist thing, like this is still at the stage where they are attaching to him of their own free will. I think that's the stage where you see him really offering. There is something with rejection types and rejection fixes that are almost like okay, and I say this with a huge asterisk next to it, but the ideal parent, in the sense that they don't need anything in return. It's only being offered to you. They don't need anything in return. Of course, like the side mark here is that rejection in return needs you to exist within their own parameters. But I think there's like a fatherliness towards being giving and not needing something in return. And there is something very motherly about offering a certain nurture without needing anything in return. It's not reciprocal. It's just going one way. So I think he really put himself in a position of power by offering both a paternal instinct and a maternal instinct, and then use that, of course, later to, now, if you want this, which who fucking doesn't want that? That's our original wound, is being disconnected from that. So here, I'm going to give it to you. And as long as you want it, you have to exist within my parameters that are going to change at my own free will, at my own discretion.
Yeah.
Great point.
Politically, you can see how Trump did that with, blaming everyone. Everything's wrong because of the Mexicans and because of the libs and just getting people worked up. Or it's your life sucks because of those brown people over there. Let's deport them. Let's build a wall.
Yeah, I wonder if there's also a mother projection onto Trump, because he is such an effete fancy boy who's like loves to look at my body. He's got that like kind of feminine shaped body, and like the vanity and the
he's got a bosom.
He's got the whole. He's got this little like he gets like what is it, manicures? Got all that kind of stuff,
and his hair done probably once a week.
Yeah, his 5 hairs done. Yeah,
I was gonna say his lack of hairs.
It's so funny, like given people would say stuff up until like I don't know, a few months ago about Trump as like the ultimate alpha male and stuff like this. Like
where? Where?
Like,
he can't build a deck. Like, what are you doing?
this guy who's like Robert Pattinson, you have to break up with Kristen Stewart. I was not invited to the Vanity Fair dinner. What?
You're so good at that accent.
You are really good. Disturbing.
Yeah, John's really low-key good at impressions. Really good at them.
Red.
Strung along by fiction from a movie screen. In Manhattan, you cannot have